This was one of my most anticipated albums of the year, and if you call yourself a metal fan, it's an absolute must listen. We're going track by track with Imperial Triumphant's Spirit of Ecstasy and State of the End to see how it did the impossible. We open up with Chump Change, Steve's jazzy bass rumbles amidst Zach's rusted machinery guitars and bellowing blackened growls, Kenny's drumming a chaotic deluge of toms alongside the slow crash of the cymbal like a clock ticking away. And as the chug of the guitar intensifies, the symphonic elements swell in turn, only to suddenly drop out for a great fake out before the madness immediately picks back up again. About 2/3 of the way through, we take a more quiet detour into bass and drums before erupting once more into a very Voivod-esque demonstration of mathy drums and wild soloing, capped off by a sprinkle of wah effect, before doubling down on the techie crunch for a pretty aggressive conclusion. Already a strong note on which to kick things off. Kenny continues his insanity on the kit with Metro Vertigo once more, making it all seem so effortless despite the levels of coordination on display. The title is appropriate to just how dizzying and disorienting it all is, like a bad trip on psychedelics.
Tell me about the fucking golf shoes!
The hypnotic chugging builds to the point of no longer sounding like a guitar, but rather a harsh wind ominously billowing against the walls for a very Portal-esque effect. There's something so chilling about this one, especially with the incorporation of ghostly chorals that are so subtle that I was second guessing as to whether they were really even there to begin with on my first listen. Not to mention all the other great little flavor touches like that sudden disarming flourish of piano. Next up is Tower of Glory, City of Shame. Very cinematic opening to this one with the spoken word along with the grand, almost Danny Elfman-esque orchestration of strings, brass, and chimes. This then contrasted by the warbly, alien-sounding guitars. Loving those harrowing screams and deeper, effects-distorted snarls too, as it opens into an eerie Bluthaus Nord Deathspell Omega sounding soundscape, adding more layers of both violence and melody along the way. And also getting downright experimental with the production at the end, chopping things up in a even more disorienting way. Definitely one of my favorites on the album overall. Mercurius Gilded has another great string arrangement opening, this one strangely soothing before the chaos takes hold again. Oddly, it reminds me of the intro to Dave Matthews Band's The Stone, even if the end result represents something not even close. In any case, it's a very interesting union of elements along with more eerie chorals to craft an atmosphere that I can only describe as feeling deeply uncanny. Love that awesome transitional drum solo too. And then, of course, there's the Kenny G guest feature, and yes, that Kenny G. Wailing away on the saxophone, and holy shit, is it one of the highlight moments of my entire year. This song in particular is a bit of an anomaly in that despite the dense maelstrom of sound, the end result is oddly digestible and accessible to the point that it may actually become my new entry point recommendation for new listeners. Death on a Highway, on the other hand, I wouldn't extend these same feelings, as some of the guitar work downright sounds like a Neanderthal just beating on the fretboard, but damned if they don't make it work. I'm also loving the kind of proggy build in the second half with the synthesizer and use of samples, ultimately evolving into a freeform sounding jazz session that joins the final sequence from 2001: A Space Odyssey, with Kenny once more sounding in danger of entirely snapping all of his limbs off. This loose jam vibe continues into the pleasure of their company, now further incorporating saxophone, muted trumpet, and some absolutely wild Hammond organ. I normally hate jam sessions, but Imperial Triumphant have a knack for always making them deeply engaging for me. I don't know what it is, because this entire track is basically just one long stream of pure instrumental improvisation, but I was fucking riveted. I wonder what Miles Davis would think if he were alive to hear this. Speaking of which, Bexumnaya only ramps up the experimentation further, now moving from jazz jams to more of the same weirdness that closed out Tower of Glory, City of Shame, but on a much broader scale. Once more, the deep, effects-shifted snarls are deeply unsettling, not only in their malevolent tone, but also how difficult they are to decipher. Frankly, it sounds downright satanic. There are also some vocals and spoken word in another language to further the sense of confusion as the drums and chugging guitars slow and slow and slow, to a complete crawl before it suddenly ends on a minimalist note that, especially after that wall of sound, is somehow even more unsettling. It's like a bizarre nightmare coming to life. And then we close with the lead single Maximalist Scream, the song that once more got me on the hype train for this album to begin with. The Voivod influences are strong with this one, and Snake himself even makes a guest appearance, but of course Imperial Triumphant put their own dark twist on the mathy riffing. Appropriately, the screams on this one are definitely a highlight, but really so is everything else. Steve absolutely kills it with one of the best bass grooves on the album, and Zach's very Deathspell Omega delivery is truly malevolent as he sermonizes from his dark pulpit. Not to mention the guitar work around the middle alongside Snake's vocals is something out of the Dillinger Escape Plan. This may very well be one of the band's best compositions to date, not to mention backed by a very Lynchian music video directed by none other than Steve himself. Put simply, this band has already blown me away time and time again, but with Spirit of Ecstasy, they have once more topped themselves completely, possibly even supplanting my previous favorite, Vile Luxury. Turning to my scales, it's a 10 for enjoyability, which is especially rare for bands on the avant-garde side of the spectrum, considering that pure enjoyment is rarely the goal. The music is meant to be more of a challenge than a passive listen, yet somehow I'd compare my level of engagement to the likes of Twin Peaks Season 3 in that, yeah, it's weird and I'm fucking confused as to what it all means, but at the same time, I'm deeply satisfied thanks to the depth of what my senses are being provided. Musicianship is a no-brainer, as I don't think I've ever given this band anything less than a 10 in this department. Their proficiency as musicians has never been in question, and add to that the continued growth of their songwriting, and I'd say that they are one of the most talented metal bands around right now, period. And in terms of innovation, fuck it. Not only is every Imperial Triumphant album completely unique with the current soundscape of music year after year, I'd say this also represents enough of a continued dedication to evolution within their own catalog to warrant a 10 here as well. So for the first time in years, I'm awarding Spirit of Ecstasy a perfect A+. Y'all check out this playlist for some of my other favorite metal albums so far this year, or this podcast episode for my interview with the band live before their set. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.